Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Fintech Nexus weekly news show. My name is Peter Renton, chairman and co-founder of Fintech Nexus, and joined, as always, by my good friend and colleague, Todd Anderson. How are you doing, Todd?
I'm well, Peter. How are you?
Doing great. Looks like you're in the New York office today.
I am.
All right. And joining us for the first time, we have our roving contributor based in Argentina. We have David Faliba. How are you doing, David?
Very well, Peter. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
My pleasure. Why don't you just give a quick 30-second intro about
Sure.
yourself and your fintech expertise.
Great. So I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And from here, I cover as a journalist fintech and crypto news for across Latin America. So basically, take a look at the bigger markets here and the trends in Brazil, Mexico, in Argentina, and the rest of the region as well.
Right, and been writing for us now, I think, for probably over a year now, right?
Full year? Yeah, I think a full year. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get over. So this edition of the news show is going to be a little different to normal because we have our big Latin American event in Miami next week. And so this is going to be very much a Latin America themed show. So we're going to kick it off with the Amazon of Latin America, Mercado Libre, and they're in talks with Meta, basically around WhatsApp, because they're going to be putting payments directly into WhatsApp. And I know people in this country don't necessarily use WhatsApp a lot, but in the rest of the world, including Latin America, WhatsApp is the standard way that everybody communicates. And so now they're going to be able to put payments in there. So, David, I presume you're a regular WhatsApp user.
If you don't use WhatsApp in Latin America, you're basically disconnected from the rest of the society, right? Yeah, we go by WhatsApp like every day, every minute, I would say.
Right. And so, but right now, can you use WhatsApp for payments at all in Argentina?
No, not at all.
So this will be a new thing.
This will be an entirely new thing, which I think is also new elsewhere in other regions for Meta.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be massive, rely on how big of a use there is in the region, right? And it could simplify a lot transactions. Right now, you would WhatsApp, like shops have WhatsApp as well, like commercial WhatsApp. So you would just write to them, and they would reply with, I don't know, maybe a restaurant with the meal, with the menu, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
With this feature, if it's ever brought about, you would be able to pay instantly. That could be massive in terms of how we do payments here.
Right, and it's
payments and messaging are kind of what I see as kind of that next evolution of the space. I mean, right now it's they're very much disconnected, and this goes beyond just LATAM. But bringing the two together, simplifies it, like David said, and going outside something. I mean, the more that you can embed within the experience that you're already in, the better it is for all parties involved. The quicker, the faster, the cheaper ultimately, because time is money, and going to different either wallets or cards or whatever, embedding it within that service makes it infinitely simpler.
Right, and we should point out too, this is going to be done through Mercado Pago, which is Mercado Libre's fintech arm or payments arm. David, why don't you just give us a quick 30 seconds on what Mercado Pago is and how big they are?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's one of the biggest, I would say, fintech companies in the region. It started out in Argentina. The original company, Mercado Libre, kind of the Amazon of LATAM, as you were saying, Peter, is the biggest option for retailers and shoppers in Brazil and Argentina and Mexico, I think, as well. I mean, it's huge, and pretty much in line with what Todd was saying. At some point, it kind of made sense for them to incorporate payments and a whole range of fintech products into its already very big client universe, right? Like now you can invest, you can have digital wallets, you can buy crypto, you can transfer money peer to peer. I mean, it's got a range of different products and a massive user base.
Right. Okay, we're going to move on to talking about massive user bases. We're going to talk about Pix. David, you wrote an article this week about the fact that Pix is opening up their protocols to the rest of the world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on there?
Sure. First, what is Pix for those in the audience that might not be super familiar with? It's a low cost payment system, instant payment system, which is basically available 24/7. And the central bank launched it, I think, 2 years ago already. It
Yep.
became massive. Everybody uses Pix in Brazil. There's even a word, like a verb for Pix, right? In Brazil, you would say you would do a Pix, you would pick something, which means you would pay something. And its success has certainly drawn like interest from other regulators in the world, especially those in emerging countries, emerging market countries, where financial inclusion still has gaps. Not everybody is into the financial system. So what happened recently is, given the success that Pix has had in Brazil and how fast, how swift its adoption has been, so the central bank said, okay, you want, I know some people are interested. If you're interested in replicating, here are the protocols for free. So what happens with that? Basically, what this means is that any regulator in Peru, in Colombia, or in Canada, Canada has also shown interest in the technology, is able to replicate those protocols if it wishes to, and maybe develop something similar. So of course, like the success that Pix had, we're talking in little, like in a year or so, half of the entire population of Brazil was already using it. So it was meteoric. It was super fast. It wouldn't be so easy to replicate maybe in other countries, but at least having the technological tools at disposal could be a good point, a good starting point, right? To begin working on that, especially for those countries with large underbanked populations in Latin
Right.
America. There are lots of them.
Right.
Anything that can help speed the adoption of real-time payments across the globe is something that a lot of governments and central banks and others should look at. I mean, with the technology advances we have today, it should not take 5 days for a payment to clear
Right.
almost anywhere in the world. I mean, it should be, if not near instant, it should be pretty much a day.
Well, we're all going to instant payments eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a done deal. Just Brazil have leapfrogged. I mean, I look at Pix and think it's probably the greatest fintech phenomenon of all time as far as the speed of adoption. And I mean, it's great the central bank is doing this, because I think, while again, it's not going to be easy to replicate that. You need a large unbanked population to replicate what Brazil has done. But still, kudos to them for making it all available. Okay, moving along to another big name. We're talking about Nubank. They announced $330 million equity capitalization into their Mexico operation. So this is Nubank Mexico. Nubank obviously huge in Brazil. They have expanded into Mexico, where they have 3 million customers, which is a lot less than they've got in Brazil, of course. But Brazil, I think the last number I heard, maybe David, you would know, is like 60 million customers.
It's already 70.
70.
So
Okay,
yeah. You blink, a day goes by, and they added another million.
Right. So what's the significance of this story, you think?
I think it's pretty significant. First of all, they've already invested $1 billion there in that expansion. So Nubank, although as you said, Peter, 95% of their client base is in Brazil, so it's mostly a Brazilian company yet. However, there have been significant efforts to expand, mostly into Mexico and also in Colombia. But it's making faster inroads into Mexico. And like you said, there are already 3 million clients. It shows to me that there's a commitment to keep the expansion. It appears that they're going to launch new products. Ultimately, down the line, they may even launch credit loans, which as of yet I think they do not have on their suite in Mexico. And for me, the interesting thing about Nubank is, being one of the largest fintechs in the region as well, is this balancing act, right, between being too aggressive in growth and the demand from investors, especially during this year, to show some profitability. So it shows that Nubank is kind of trying to take it in both sides, right? It was able to show past break even in the last quarter, in the third quarter, well, I think it was something close to $10 million in net profits. It's still small, but significant in terms of they managed to turn it around, and it's also working on at the same time keeping that growth base. Incorporating more users to the client base. Then you can figure out how to take profits out of them.
Right. Right.
I think what it shows really is Nubank sees an opportunity in Mexico, a big one. And shameless plug right here. We'll have Nubank's Mexico head of New Mexico will be joining us next week in Latam. I will be interviewing Ivan, and so you can hear more about their growth story in Mexico, and kind of what's next, and where things are for New Mexico, because I think they see a big opportunity for the Mexican consumer. And after their success in Brazil, you have to think they're going to become a huge player in that market.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that interview for sure. So let's move on to another big name. Back to your home country there, David. We've got Voila. They have also expanded into Mexico. They bought a bank a year ago, ABC Capital. And now they are providing personal loans in Mexico, and they're these are not big loans, like 20,000 pesos, which is around $1,000 US. But it's another. It's the first time, I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. Do they offer personal loans in Argentina?
They do, I think.
They do.
I'm pretty sure they do. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about Voila. I mean, you've obviously been following them for a while, I'm guessing.
These companies like Nubank, they offer an increasing range of products, right? Whenever they can, they add more ways of creating value, I guess, or increasing the revenue per customer. And loans, as we know, is an incredibly complex thing to do, incredibly hard and riskier than other products. But it's still worth the while, apparently, for many of the fintechs, because it helps much better in terms of the profitability that you can get out of a client. It does much better than perhaps like a fee on a crypto brokerage trade, or just holding money on a digital wallet. So it seems to me that Walla is finally venturing out, even in this context, in terms of the economy, into a segment that can help shore up its profits. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's move on. We are going to be talking about this was an interesting one. Brazil postponing capital requirements deadline for fintechs. So I think this is one that you wrote, I believe, David, and you could tell us firstly what are the capital requirements for fintechs, because we don't have them here in this country. But what are they going to what's they're going to look like when they come into effect?
So it's called specifically, I think the regulation is prudential capital requirements. So basically, for a long time, and I guess elsewhere, it's kind of similar, right? In the U.S. or in Europe, banks seeing these increased competition from fintechs, they started arguing or asking for kind of a level playing field. So there's been some pressure, some lobby for regulators to finally give some kind of regulation to these companies, especially as in Brazil in particular, they've grown very fast over the past few years. You were just given the example of Nubank before, 70 million plus customers. That's a big number for, as a regulator. It's getting increasingly risky for the system if you do not act on it. So what happened is there was a capital, like a reserve requirement that they had to put aside, similar to what happened with banks. It's not exactly the same number. It's progressive. I think it starts at 6.5%, and over the course of, I think, 3 or 4 years, it gets to about 10% of how much they've loaned. And the thing is, in this context where the economy in Brazil is kind of weak, inflation, as in the rest of the world, is kind of high, and rates are super high in Brazil. If the Fed has raised rates very fast in the U.S., then take a look at Brazil. They've taken it from 2% to almost 14% in less than a year.
Less than a year. Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of a restrictive, tightening environment for companies.
Yeah.
So fintechs are struggling, and with this new decision by the central bank, what it does is basically it postpones the implementation of that by 6 months. It's not a lot, but it's still some breathing room for companies which are today under I would say under pressure.
So does that mean they have to maintain cash on for loans? They lend out money and they got to maintain a certain percentage of that on their own balance sheet. Is that similar to what the banks have to do?
Yeah,
Right.
that's pretty similar. I think banks have a higher rate, but still it works the same way. It works the same way. And it's basically for prudence, prudence. Just yeah, in the case, just protecting customers, I would say,
Mhm.
their deposits.
Yeah, I mean I'd be curious the how big the continuing impact of the economy will be on kind of the various stages and areas of fintech all across the region. This is just one specific area, but you're going to start seeing a lot of pressure on fintech, and the pressure ultimately hits certain areas of the fintech community, and where does it hit hardest?
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. So we're going to move. We'll move to other news now. Just for a moment, we had the New York Times. They've had a lot of stories about crypto, and they had the whole deal book event that you were at last week. We talked about that on last week's show, but they did a really interesting piece about the title "The Crypto Industry Struggles for a Way Forward." Because after the whole FTX debacle, you've got Binance and Coinbase are trying to distance themselves, trying to differentiate. We're very different. They've got like proof of reserves that they're doing. I mean, the Circle CEO says this is actually good for them because people now want to use stable coins instead of these crazy these sort of coins that are kind of backed by nothing. There's been the criticism that I hadn't heard this quote before, and I thought it was really interesting in this article. They said the crypto industry is more centralized than the banking industry because they've got some of these huge centralized exchanges that are controlling most of the activities. So it was a fascinating story, and one that I think the crypto it's still playing out. It's going to play out over months and months, but I know, Todd, you were there last week at the Dealbook event and heard the SBF. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that they're starting to become this kind of dual track to the industry right now, which is the exchanges and kind of the speculative action on crypto and the underlying technology, because you heard it many times at that event. Larry Fink of BlackRock talked about it, like what the underlying technology can unlock is potentially huge.
Mhm.
We go back to the real-time payments story we were talking about before. Almost immediate or close to real-time settlement, and the elimination of middlemen, and so that is, I think, an area where a lot of traditional FIs are still very bullish on.
Right.
But the speculation and the trading and to be honest, the people issue on the other side of the crypto ledger, because most of this was executives just doing either stupid, fraudulent, or taking too much risk. I mean, I don't think anyone's talking about Compound or any of these other protocols that the technology is wrong.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it came to SBF, Alex Mashinsky, and others made either fraudulent or bad, overly risky bets that ultimately didn't pay off.
Right.
And that translates to traditional finance, crypto finance, whatever finance. So I think the key thing is can legislators and regulators separate those two? And
Yeah.
today, I believe, Peter, you're with me on this. They probably can't. Maybe more on the regulator side can, but the legislative slide can't.
Right.
And what does that mean going forward? Because I think that's the unknown that we're dealing with.
Yeah. How was this all viewed down in Latin America, David? The whole FTX blowout, because I know that crypto's got massive adoption I think in your home country, there's really serious adoption of crypto.
There's a great correlation between unstable economy, restrictions, inflation, and the adoption of crypto.
Right.
Perhaps not for the same things that you would use it in I don't know, Europe or elsewhere, but also in Venezuela, which shares some conditions, unfortunately, with Argentina in the sense of high inflation. It's been used for lots of things like cross-border flows, remittances, also to just hedge as a hedge against inflation. Just some people, they invest in stable coins, or they even collect their salaries in stable coins just to avoid local currency, whether it be bolivars in Venezuela or pesos in Argentina. In terms of the FTX, it's been a huge blow in terms of confidence, as I think everyone in the world. Todd is very precise, and I get the same commentary from fintech leaders in the region that you got to be able to to tell apart between the technology and so forth, and what is in the end just a poorly managed company, a poorly an executive doing the wrong things. So that's a clear difference, and it's pretty much similar here, the view. However, going directly into FTX, many of the countries here did not use FTX so much as they
Right.
did Binance. So that makes a difference in terms of not so many people have lost their money
Mhm.
as maybe in the I think in the US or in a different place where FTX was much more popular.
Right.
Binance here is the most popular alternative.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Moving on to other fintech news. This, I think, just came out overnight. Plaid, who has been the fintech darling, shall we say, for ever since they decided not to, or the US government decided they weren't going to merge with Visa. Um, they have they've been on this massive bull run, and they are they're one of the most impressive companies in all of fintech. And we've had their CEO Zach speak at our events many times over the years, and they're laying off 260 employees, which is roughly 20% of their workforce. And he said he was. I mean, I got to admit, there's been a lot of layoffs in fintech. This seems like one of the better layoffs as far as how it was managed. And
But at the same time, it was probably one of the more surprising.
Yeah, it was.
Because you'd think in this environment and their business that they'd be a bit more protected, infrastructure, the contracts, the connections into all these various banks, like at least from the outside looking in, there feels like stability there. And maybe this is more just a hedge against some of the macro conditions. And but it when seeing it, it made me kind of pause a little bit, because some of the other stuff we've seen, especially like the Coinbase and others, it's like, yeah, they clearly overhired, and now they're correcting that. This didn't feel like that. It kind of felt a little different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing that I noticed that he said is like they were their customers, Plaid's customers, and obviously they have a lot of banks, but a lot of fintechs as well as customers said their customers have been slowing down. So I think certainly on the lending side we've seen that, certainly in the crypto side, and that the slowdown is really what has impacted this. So
Yep.
I mean, it's very it's surprising, but in many ways, when you read the reasoning, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, let's move on. We did this article earlier this week about a new word I learned, Remtech, which is remittance technology, because remittances are a huge thing, obviously in Latin America, really big, but in many places around the world, there's actually 1 billion people use remittances, they say, in 80 plus countries. There was an IMF paper that we did, this article was based on, talking about the impact of how fintech's impact on remittances. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting was that it said fintech has not really taken as much cost out as was expected. And there's still a lot of room to move there. It said mobile money transfers is maybe the best, has sort of the best chance of really removing costs. But David, maybe like remittances obviously big in Latin America. Did you what are your thoughts on this?
I think that's a good question. Obviously, it's very big. Just to put some numbers, it's $130 billion market every year. So it's basically a lot of money going cross borders. Of course, most of it is in Central America, Mexico. people living in the States sending money back home to their families. And the number you said, 1 billion, that also sounds super huge. I mean, it's clearly a very big market. What I yet don't understand, and it's a question I'd like to ask in a panel next week about crypto payments in particular, is why haven't fintechs tackled it decisively? I mean, until now, what is? Everybody knows there's money to be made. Everybody knows it's a huge market. What are the obstacles in driving this forward? Crypto is becoming one of the alternatives to high costs. It's super expensive to do cross-border payments in the region, and so there's a clear opportunity. Some companies are beginning to do that. Crypto is a vehicle, is a tool, and it's being slowly adopted. It remains to be seen who will be the clear winner here.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, this one's I asked myself that same question, David, and I wonder is, where are the biggest impediments? Because you'd think if I'm gonna send money back to my family, cost is obviously one of the biggest things you'll look at. And conceivably on the front and from the outside looking in, you'd say technology, fintech, no storefront, no traditional MoneyGram way of sending money, that it'd be cheaper. And I think fintechs have struggled to crack it. I think the company or companies that truly do crack it have a huge opportunity. But at the same time, some of the old school players are starting to innovate as well.
Yeah.
And so it's this interesting dynamic. But yeah, I would have thought there'd be more fintech penetration in the space, and there hasn't been yet.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, clearly, I think cash is probably one of the biggest impediments because people want to receive their payment. You can send it any way you want, but the person at the other end, if they don't want to receive it on their phone in an app, they want to receive it as cash, then that's a real impediment to taking the cost out. So anyway, we're almost out of time. One last story. This is a Chilean fintech. I don't even know how to say this company name. Destacame how do you say it, David? Do you know the Chilean?
I would say Destacame.
Destacame.
It depends on whether you're in Chile and Argentina. It's a different.
Right. Okay. Well, it is a Chilean fintech. They've raised $10 million from Kayak Ventures and Fen Capital. They're a big deal. They've got 4.5 million users. They're growing in Mexico like weed, and they like a weed, and they've grown. They just raised $10 million Series B. So, do you know anything about this company, David?
I'm not familiar with exactly their business, but what amazes me about this news is the fact that like a Chilean company would go all the way into Mexico. It just I think reinforces the concept that we were discussing at the beginning, right? Like Mexico becoming like a hot market, like everybody wants to get into Mexico. Like not depending, it doesn't depend on whether you're too big or small sized or medium sized in this case of the Destacame. It's just like Mexico is becoming a very hot market apparently.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well that wraps it up. Before we go though, we have the World Cup happening, big matches. Your homeland playing the Netherlands tomorrow. David, what's your expectation? Messi going to score a hat trick?
No, that would be overly optimistic. I would be satisfied with just a 2-1 win.
Right. Okay. Well, we are.
I'm not. Yeah, I just want to avoid, the shootouts, the penalty shootouts.
Yeah,
that's too bad.
They're heartbreaking. I always say there's no bigger pressure in sports than a penalty shootout at the World Cup. But we got Brazil, Croatia. If both Mexico and Argentina come through, they will be meeting in the semifinal. That is going to be a huge
for the ages.
Yeah. And you can watch that at Fintech Nexus LATAM.
Yes, exactly.
Along with meeting with your fellow fintech founders and investors in Miami. So make sure you get your tickets today. There's still some available.
Yep, there still is. FintechNexus.com. Tickets available. We are starting, and we're actually starting Monday night, but it's Tuesday, Wednesday. We have a special viewing lounge for the World Cup. And if Brazil play Argentina, we are actually going to shut things down, and we're going to be on the keynote stage. There is going to be the game on the big screen. So we'll see what happens. We'll be watching with very keen support, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So anyway, thank you, David, thank you, Todd, as always. We'll be back same time next week with our regular programming, and have a great evening and weekend, everybody.